Hello and welcome to another monthly installment of the Lean Catalyst, Strategies and Tactics for the Transformational CEO. My name is Damon Baker and I will be your host for today's interview. And in a second, I will introduce you to today's esteemed guests. In this dynamic monthly 1-hour interview series, we bring together like-minded CEOs and leaders who successfully embrace lean thinking to drive exceptional results in their organizations. And it's through our captivating conversations that we'll dive into their remarkable achievements, uncovering the strategies and insights and practical wisdom that have propelled them and their organizations forward. Each series features an in-depth interview with a distinguished CEO who's demonstrated extraordinary leadership in leveraging lean principles. And it's a great opportunity for them to share their experiences, strategies, and valuable knowledge with us and others so that we can apply them to our own lean leadership journeys. So today, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to today's guest, Dara Grantham Wright. Morning, Dara.
Morning, Damon.
So prior to her role at Madison Industries, which we're going to get into here, Dara served in a number of numerous leadership positions within the biotech space. She spent over 11 years at Becton Dickinson in various leadership positions, finishing there as a senior director of global strategic marketing for cell analysis. After Becton Dickinson, she held various senior leadership roles at Boreal Genomics and Affymetrix, which was later acquired by Thermo Fisher Scientific. And at Thermo Fisher Scientific, Dara managed a $1 billion P&L with over 800 full-time associates as vice president and general manager of the protein and cell analysis business within the life sciences solution group of Thermo Fisher. Most recently, prior to her role at Madison, Dara was the EVP and president of Biorad's clinical diagnostics group, where she led a global business comprised of a broad product portfolio, including instrumentation, test, and software for diabetes, blood typing, infectious disease, immunology, autoimmunity, and quality controls, serving clinical hospital laboratories, reference laboratories, and academic medical centers. Dara has also worked with the team there to create a 5-year strategic roadmap, built a leadership team during her period there, and grew the business to over $1.5 billion in revenue. On the educational side, Dara graduated from Willamette University and got her MBA from San Diego State University. Sound like you, Dara?
Sounds like me, although my fellow Bearcats would be offended if I didn't correct you and say it's Willamette.
Willamette. Sorry, my bad.
And there's a way that we remember the rhyme, but I won't say it in public company.
Yeah, I got all the scientific terms pronounced correctly, but then I screwed up the university. Like that's pretty standard sort of stuff.
Thank you.
So for those of you on the call that maybe haven't met Dara, so Dara, I'm going to ask you a question. What initially sparked your interest in lean and continuous improvement? And if you could sort of take us back to that time and how that initial exposure to that has shaped your career journey since then.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking, Damon, and thanks so much for having me today. I'm a huge fan of yours and a huge fan of the company and what you do. So it's just a real pleasure to be here today. So I was first exposed to the notion of lean and primarily through learning about Six Sigma. It was maybe 20 years ago. It was actually at BD where they had a black belt program, and the form that took at the time was really just teaching us tools, ways to do structured problem solving, to collect data and organize it to understand what was going on from a trending perspective. And I loved that. I'm naturally quite an organized person, and I really like frameworks, and I'm oriented towards waste reduction and simplification just as a person. And so I really loved having some tools for problem solving and frameworks. What I sort of came to learn later in my career is that I kind of lacked context at the time, but that was when I was first exposed to lean and the notion of Six Sigma in practice in operational environments.
So when you were a child, were you one of those children who had a very organized room and every toy had a place and you knew when it was out of place?
Every toy had a place. Yeah, I'm still like that. I'm probably pretty hard to live with, but that's an interview for another day.
Yeah. So I describe it as having the virus. So apparently
Yes,
you also have the virus as
I
well.
have the virus.
So I'm really interested in kind of exploring your new role. So you're in Madison Medical, which is part of Madison Industries. So for those that maybe haven't heard of Madison Industries, can you give us sort of an introduction to the company, what it's about, and sort of the philosophy around the holding company and so on?
Yeah, so Madison Industries, it's a wonderful company. I would describe it as a diversified holding company. We have about, 85 companies today that are part of the Madison Industries family. Everything that we do is aligned towards our goal of, serving industries that make the world safer, healthier, and more productive. So we're very mission driven in the assets that we own and scale. We're a private company, but we're, what I would characterize as durable capital. So we invest in companies and we buy them as if we're going to hold them forever. That's really, I think, the way that you make better decisions as an owner, and we grow them and scale them to their best potential. The company is organized for the most part into 4 platform verticals, and in a variety of different, serving a variety of different end markets. And the platform that I have the privilege of leading is called Madison Medical. So handful of companies, it's an area that we're looking to invest more in and build more, but we have companies in everything from medical devices to healthcare education. So really quite diverse.
Yeah. So yeah, you made an important distinction about being a holding company and how that's different than the traditional private equity firm that would acquire companies like you just described and then may own them for a period of 3 to possibly 7 years, the longest. And why that's an important distinction, and you said it, is how you manage the portfolio is very different when you have a long-term horizon, and the decisions you make, especially decisions you make around lean implementation and things like that, are probably be more skewed towards short-term realization of the benefit so that we can exit this company at a higher multiple than when we purchased it. Whereas in the Madison Industries example, it's more about culture, sustainability for the long term. Let's not make decisions that deviate from sort of a long term ROI for shareholders and investors and the like.
That's
So
right. That's right. I think you make better decisions if you don't have an arbitrary time frame. Sure, you always have to, create value every day, but I think, if you aren't looking to have a particular exit by a particular date, you make good decisions. And it's very entrepreneurial. We are all owners in our companies, and I think you also make better decisions if you know you wear that stakeholder hat as well.
yeah. So how are you thinking about continuous improvement? You talked about you had the virus, right? And you've worked at a number of different places that have had some level of what we would refer to as like a lean operating system or a lean business system. You had it at BD, you had it at Thermo Fisher with PPS, I believe it was called,
Mhm.
and then at Biorad's been on this lean journey for quite some time, and now you come into a new organization. How are you thinking about bringing what's helped you been successful in the past as a leader into a new organization while respecting and preserving all the goodness about how the company runs and the decentralized operating model? So sort of like, where are you going to put your chips, right? And I know you're only roughly 6 months onto the job, so I don't want to put too much pressure on you in that answer.
Yeah. No, I think, Damon, I'm gonna borrow something that you say because I think it's a perfect way to describe it. You've seen one lean implementation, you've seen one lean implementation. So you just, described sort of the whistle stop journey of my career, and each experience was different because it's got to be the right tool for that particular job. And I think, where, people perhaps go wrong is they take a tool set and they sort of copy and paste to different experiences.
Yeah.
And it just isn't relevant because that journey, those companies are a different place, they've got a different needs, different strategic imperatives. So I really believe in, first sort of, outside in what we're trying to accomplish, inside out, what are the systems that will enable that, and then ensuring that we bring everybody along to that party. I mean, lean, we've talked about this before, in our experience working together, but lean is a mindset, lean is a leadership ethos. It's not a spreadsheet. And I think this is why other companies are so relatively transparent around their tool sets, because you can take the spreadsheets fine. You're doomed to failure if you really don't have the sort of the cultural engagement that is really clear and aligned to what you're trying to solve and what you're trying to get out of it, and sort of what's in it for me, as a person engaging in that journey.
Yeah. So, I think the 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 challenge you run into if you don't do what you just described, kind of think of it as a doctor who sees all these patients each and every day, and a lot of what patients describe are symptoms, which on the surface they're outward, they're evident, and if you're not careful, you can start to just react to the symptoms, and then you use the same repeatable solutions and countermeasures each and every time. And the danger in that is when you're right 51% of the time, you start convincing yourself that you must know what you're doing.
Right.
But then there's other sort of times when the solution didn't work. And in the case of the company, right, company being the patient, if you don't really take the time to understand why this business is successful, where they're going next, what the macro environment looks like, what's unique about the people and the culture inside this organization. And I think it's doubly challenging for you because it's not really one company. It's one holding company, and it's several individual operating companies that do have their own culture, their own style, their own things they do well, things that they could improve on, things they need to focus on, which is a different answer, right? It's like different sub patients, if you will, that need different
Yeah.
prescriptions in order to be successful wherever they're at in their stage of the journey. So I think it
Mhm.
takes humility as a leader, which I know that you have, to sort of recognize that and meet those businesses and those leaders where they are.
Yeah. Thanks, Damon. Yeah, I think the key element of what you're saying, and what really transcends all of these use cases, is getting alignment on the North Star. What are lean. I think we forget how strategic it is in practice. I think because of the awareness of the tool sets within, operations and operational environments, people, don't always, conflate that with appropriately with the strategy. But lean is very, very strategic. And I think if you always start there, I think people will say, what does Dara always say? Strategy first, always. Strategy first, always. And so if we're clear on the strategy and how we think about the strategies and the plays for each of these businesses and what the expected outcomes are, if we have that alignment, then there are lots of great tools and frameworks that we can use within the lean and continuous improvement tool set to ensure that then we know whether we're winning or losing against that objective every day. And what the tools that sort of lean focus and the engagement that you provided, with my companies over the years, has been just that common language, but first it's minds, and it's alignment, but then some common language. And so that you can get more efficient in seeing whether or not you're executing against that mission every day.
Yeah,
And
you
that's the
mentioned
magic.
mindset a couple times, and I know that's really important to you. So if you could unpack that word and imagine like you're going into an organization for the first time, and you're looking for uh, really to create a current state of the mindset of the leaders within that organization. And maybe you have in your mind like a standard of here's what good looks like related to good lean behavior mindset types of things that I would like to see. And then what is it that you're looking for? So just give you an example. Like I go into a lot of potential clients and we talk with leaders, and one of the things they sometimes do is they blame their circumstances on the outside world.
Mhm.
Like the market's down, therefore we're down. What do you want me to do about it, kind of thing. Whereas a lean mindset would be own the outcome, be data driven, be fact based, no matter what the circumstances, extreme ownership.
Yeah.
That's one of many examples, but what do you look for personally? So like what's Dara's recipe for success for leadership mindsets?
Hmm. Oh gosh, I wish I had it sort of distilled down to, to 5 points so I could sound super, super clever.
All right, we didn't
But
rehearse this.
yeah,
I just
but
wanted to
like,
speak.
you use the notion of the sort of the symptoms in the patient, before is, the first diagnosis is, if can I ask anybody in that company what their strategy is and how do they sort of measure progress against that? Because if we don't know where we're going, we don't know where we are. And then the other thing I really look for is creativity. Do people, and also psychological safety to bring up issues and opportunities. That if those three things are in place, like people, they want to win. You understand what the strategy is. You're controlling what you can control. People are addressing, core issues in a way that's transparent. Then you have all the ingredients you need to work
Yeah.
with, right? Like that's just brilliant. The dream is that people are always looking for, better ways and getting a little bit better every day and reaching for, creativity before their wallet. And, there's a spectrum of that in the businesses I run today. Some are incredibly creative. I mean, almost too creative where they're under investing. But then, you get the other side of the spectrum where it's like just throw more resources at it. And, all you're doing is sort of masking an underlying issue. And what we try to sort of engage with folks culturally is, all those issues. What waste is trapped cash, like that's trapped mission. Like if we can free up, cash, that's more mission. That's how we get the flywheel spinning faster. That's how we grow these businesses. And if you can tap into, that unlock, then it's a full court sport. Because people are just looking for like how do I liberate this trapped cash so I can do more things with it, more
In
innovation, more
your
commercial.
experience,
Yeah.
Dara, have those three things been teachable, coachable that you're looking for? Or is
I
it
think
kind of like
so. I
you
mean,
have it or you don't have
sometimes,
it?
yeah, it's a really good point, Damon. I think sometimes, you have to get the right mix of talent. You get the right mix of talent, it can be a force multiplier. But I really believe in leading by example, and that's probably been the biggest unlock in, most of the lean transformation journeys or the implementations that I've done in the past is you have to show up. You can't outsource a leadership agenda of creating, getting better every day and driving continuous improvement if you're not showing up that way yourself every single day and you're in there with your teams. And so I think that sets the tone, and it's more effective, at least in my experience, when you're driving engagement in that way.
Yeah, I tell a lot of our client CEOs that you, the CEO, have to become a teacher in
Mhm.
this, and model the behavior. And that doesn't mean like standing in the front of the classroom, like teaching the lesson, whereas it could certainly be that, but it's more than that. It's if people are struggling to execute strategy, stepping in and knowing when to coach, when to lead, when to teach, and showing people through your model, that you're role modeling, how to do this stuff. Because uh, to my knowledge, there isn't a school that teaches you how to do this in a university. So it's like, where do you learn it? Like if you don't get it in industry, and if you don't get it by being exposed to the right leaders and the right cultures that really teach you how to do this well, it's kind of default back to the way we were raised or the way we were taught in school. And just problem solving, like one of those things that seems really simple. PDCA was not taught in any of the universities I went to. I mean,
Mhm.
but it's such a simple thing that most people just struggle with is what's the problem that we're trying to solve
The
within
problem we're
this
trying to
business.
solve. Yeah. And isn't that a powerful question?
Yeah.
So that's on the top five too. See, now you've just made me seem really, really smart. So yeah, do you know the strategy? Always leading with, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Another one I often use is, well, what would have to be true?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think it helps you hypotheses hypothesis test.
For sure. And I think the third one was, you talked about psychological safety and how transparent the team is and how safe and comfortable they feel like bringing up problems within the business. So especially in a holding company situation like Madison, where it could be viewed, and I'm not saying this is the case, is like, okay, Dara's here from corporate. We need to make sure we create the best presentation and that everything looks solid so that we don't get a bunch of homework assignments when she leaves, and that we can go about our way and those kinds of things. So it's not, you're not there to audit, right? You're there to unlock potential and help the business break out, and continue to grow and develop and improve and these kinds of things. That honestly takes a lot of humility as a leader to welcome that sort of feedback, and that and also have to have trust with you that you're not going to use that information to beat them up with it, right? So like, would they show their KPIs as red, or they talk about their problems openly, that you're not going to use that as a judgment against that leader and that leader's team. So to me, that's like the hallmark of a problem solving culture, is whether or not they have problems, they view themselves as having problems, and how openly they talk about them, and more importantly, what they do about them. And there's a famous quote that I really love, Taiichi Ohno, where he said something to the effect is, no problem is a big problem. So like, if you don't have problems in your organization, it's not that you don't have problems, it's that you're not talking about them and dealing with them openly, and you're hiding or masking those problems at multiple levels within the company. So you talk about unlocking value. To me, problems are, like, just like you said, is trapped opportunity.
It's trapped opportunity. Yeah. And, to the narrative, sort of this discussion point around, helping people feel, safe. We want to create an environment where you always attack the problem, not the person. And if we've got, tool sets and ways to sort of get after, what's the data, what's it telling us, what are opportunities, for improvement, and we can do that in a way that's not anchored to, well, Bob did that and Joe did that and Carla did that, or, they did that in the past. If we can sort of depersonalize it, and it's like, that's the mission, I think that starts to build the trust that you're talking about, because it's not, no person is being blamed for it, right? And so I think that's incredibly important. The other thing we really talk about is, and this is probably overdone, but the sort of embracing the red, never again beating somebody up about the red. And when we look at scorecards, and we just did our Q2, full roundup and the forecast for the rest of the year. And it was a sort of a mix of reds and greens. I said, guys, this is exactly what I want to see. If this was all green, I would be really concerned.
Did like a sense of relief, come through the
yeah. I said, guys, this is a great scorecard. And it's really quite balanced, and it tells us where we need to work. And what do you think we should work on? Are we have we prioritized appropriately? Are we working on too many things? What would be your approach to sort of refine our focus areas? Do you think fixing that red is as important as leaning into that green thing that's going really well? And so these are the kinds of discussions that we have, and I think the more that you do that, it gets that cultural flywheel going quite well. Everybody wants to do a good job.
Nobody's on their way to work saying, how do I like destroy this company this morning?
Exactly.
So a lot of your questions seem very Socratic in nature, like not giving the answer, but really encouraging people to think on their own about the situation so that they can be better thinkers. Is that deliberate, or has it just been something you've done over the course of your career that you've found success in?
I think that it's become more deliberate as I've gotten more experience, but having sort of grown up as first a scientist and then in strategic marketing, it's all about asking good questions and testing hypotheses. And so I think I probably, and I'm a super, super curious person, super obnoxiously curious. I tell everybody that when I come into a new company or meeting people. I said, okay, just so you know, the questions I'm asking don't in any way take them as a test or as a challenge for how well you know your business. I'm fascinated. Like, I just want to know everything. So I think, having my nature of being super, super curious, um, you know, in science, you're just testing hypotheses and you're asking good questions. In marketing, you're doing the same thing. I think that just has been, I guess, my calling card that has gotten refined, as I've matured in my career.
I think one of your superpowers, and I've never shared this with you, is, and I've seen this in a number of times on display at Biorad, is my sample size, so I can't speak to pre or Biorad. Is you state the intent of the questions that you're asking, right? So it's and that why here's why to me that's important. So you could say, show me your strategy because I need to see your strategy to know if you're aligned, right? Or you could say, here's what I'd like to see your strategy because it'll help me better learn more about your market so that I can ask great questions so that I can be of value to you. So it's almost in service of the leadership team in the company, like servant leadership. But then I think the important part of that is by stating your intent, you sort of cut off all of the stories that people may be telling themselves about why Dara is here and asking question A, B, and C. So again, is that deliberate? Like, is that something you had success with? Like, I need to state why I'm asking these questions and why these things matter before I launch into the inquisition, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe it goes back to a sort of a golden rule notion as well, is I create the environment and treat people the way I want to be treated, and the environment in which I do my best work and I show up most effectively. And I reflect on times in my career where I felt like it was a pop quiz or a
Yeah.
test, where I don't know the context.
Yeah. And no matter what, I always
And
have the wrong answer and there's more questions.
yeah, yeah. And I just don't think people do their best work. And so if we can, set the context or set it together, if we, aren't on the same page, then I think you get to, the heart of the matter much quicker. Like, here's the room in which we're going to operate today. Like, let's tap into that folder. Let's talk about it. Again, I've got the virus. I'm very organized. I also think in frameworks. And if you're, all over the place, you're meandering trying to figure out how we're, what we're trying to accomplish together, it's super inefficient. So I
Yeah.
probably also, do the context setting because of my need for efficiency to some extent too. Like, you set the tone and you know which lane you're operating in, you can sort of get there more quickly.
Yeah. I've never seen you try to play the game of gotcha where you try to catch the team, and
Oh, that'd be horrible.
that kind of thing. And I think it's really important because it really feeds that third thing you talked about, that psychological safety thing where they feel, no matter how dire the news, I can bring this up because we're going to work on this together. And having a problem doesn't mean that I am the problem as a
Right.
leader. So,
That's right.
so I want to shift gears and sort of reflect back on all your experience, good and bad, with lean, whether that's applied in the traditional operations context or lean thinking, lean principles, and problem solving applied to growth and commercial challenges or strategy. What have been some of the biggest takeaways or lessons learned as you reflect backwards in time on what you found? If you were to give people a handbook to leave behind, it's like, don't make these same mistakes that Dara did
Mhm.
with these things as relates to implementing a lean business system and a culture within your organization. And if you want to talk growth, you want to talk operations, and what's been your reflection as you look back on your career, like some of the challenges and obstacles that you'd like to steer
Mhm.
people away from?
Mhm.
I know
Well,
you and I were
Damon, I'm going
talking
to
about
keep.
one before the call, but go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
Yeah, you talked about like templates, right? And like a lot of people thinking that lean is about filling out the forms. And if you get wrapped up in the forms, you miss the mindset and the bigger picture. So you may think that is one of the challenges and obstacles maybe early on in your career. You too did that, or you observed others doing those kinds of things, and that led to people not really understanding how this all works, and therefore maybe dismissing it as being irrelevant because they view it as a form filling out exercise, and who could blame them?
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's a key one is, it has to be context driven. You always have to start with why and what's in it for me. And so when that part of the journey has been short circuited, it doesn't work sustainably. And so there have been, times where, either, I've rushed it, or, just didn't have as much of an appreciation for, what it was really going to take to sort of, co-create and build a system that was going to work for everybody together. Um, and you learn that, and you refine. But I also think that as long as you're approaching it from a lean leadership, point of view, and you can answer those questions, why and what's in it for me, then, there's no bad way to start. If I zoom back out and go, gosh, what if I sort of transform my lean transformations, there probably could have been more efficient ways, because it wasn't always, driven from the top. There wasn't always, you know, uh,
Never
clean and
perfect.
consistent languages and implementations in all the factories. Was trying to drive transformation within a function, and it didn't always, line up to execution within a factory. There's always issues,
Yeah.
but I think if you approach it from that mindset of that it is a mindset set, and there is a why and there's a what's in it for me, it kind of works out, because you are delivering the value. So my last with Biorad, we really did a lot of work in, strategy deployment, and a big focus on R&D. And you kind of think like, well, that's not the natural place to start.
Yeah.
But it was an area that we really needed, not only to enhance our product development processes at their core, but really drive a step change in productivity and efficiency that just got even worse during COVID, that we had to sort of course correct from. But ultimately, we needed to transform that into the factories, and sort of they were in a different place on the lean journey. And so then we had to zoom back out and say, okay, now let's make sure that we've got strategy deployment clear, and we understand where everything intersects. We've got priorities with all our matrix partners that are clear, and this notion of the black dot and the X matrix became a fun shorthand. And so we almost we got 10 paces down, and we had to go back to 2, but then ultimately we got to 6, and that was a really good place to be. And so I think there's no, like, you have to just start. And as long as you can answer the questions of why and what's in it for me and what are we trying to accomplish, I kind of don't think there's a bad outcome.
Yeah, yeah, and some people may view that as like, well, we wasted a lot of time figuring out like where to go and what to do next. And I would argue the opposite, honestly. Like, you guys started with a business imperative, a strategic business imperative, a problem, if you will. Like, we need to launch a cadence of products to allow us to meet our revenue targets, and we're unable to do that today. That's a big problem for us. So we better figure out how to do that. And oh, by the way, lean tools and thinking can be brought to innovation in a way to accomplish that objective. But then when you got into it, it's just like when you tear in walls of an old house. It's like
Yeah.
you don't know what you're dealing with until you open up the wall and see what's inside. So then you're like, oh, we have misalignment challenges within our organization
Hmm.
because of how we deploy goals.
Hmm.
Oh, there's a process for that called strategy deployment. Let's teach the team how to do that. And then quickly, like, the team's coming to your monthly meetings, like, now we have red KPIs, and people are going, I don't know how to solve problems. Like, well, we better teach people how to do problem solving,
Hmm.
right? So it's like,
Right. That's
so
right.
it's like step by step. But what's different in that is, like, you didn't superimpose this huge, map of all the things we need to do in this order, because I did it at, Thermo Fisher or wherever else I worked, and then I'm superimposing something onto the company that maybe they don't even need 75% of, because the situation doesn't call for it, right?
Hmm.
So it kind of goes back to your point about, like, you've seen one. You've seen
Yeah,
one.
you've seen one. Super
Yeah.
context specific, isn't it? Super context specific. And yeah, I think though another guiding principle that served us, it has always served me is, solve problems at the, I don't know the right way to say it, but at the closest point of impact. And so
Gemba.
ultimately every quote tier system looks different or how things ladder up, but whether it was R&D or whether it was marketing or whatever, we sort of created this environment of ownership and local problem solving, and then where that information needed to ladder up, we sort of built systems for that to happen naturally so people didn't spin if they needed help. That was also sort of an unlock. So that became sort of a natural thing where people were solving problems, but then they knew where to link them to if it required a different sort of resource deployment or help needed.
And that in a sense too is like setting up a structure, like wiring a house. Like I describe it as in companies that lack that, it's like a bunch of one-way roads where problems are only going up to folks like yourself. And it's like, Dara, boom, explosion. Like at the monthly meeting, we're talking about some challenge that if we had the right infrastructure, ownership, KPIs, cadence of review, and processes at the right levels of the organization, less of those things would become those explosions at the top because they would be dealt with at the point of impact, to use your words, where those people have the responsibility and the ownership and the tools and the people and the resources to solve those challenges, and they're not all looking up going solve our problems for us.
That's right. That's right.
So,
And easier said than done, but it's like first just driving that transparency of what's going on in, every local place, and the challenges and the opportunities and the talent. It starts to, allow you to sort of get that uh, I guess that tension right of, visibility versus escalation versus coming with, options, data and options and help needed if resources need to be deployed that aren't, naturally deployable at the local level. But so much of this again is just creating that environment.
you know, one of the things, questions I get a lot, and mainly this comes from either CI people or direct reports to a president or a CEO. And the question goes something like this, and stop me if you heard this one. I can't get buy-in from my CEO or president to embark on this lean journey. Can you please help me to influence him or her so that they can find religion like I have, or something to that effect? I
Right.
probably answer that question at least 100 times a year at least. So how would being in the seat, that people are trying to influence, right? What advice would you give the world out there? It's like, hey, if you're trying to influence the folks at the top who make the financial decisions on whether or not to do something like this, what advice would you give those people?
I think it goes back to what we just described as the imperative for anybody that you're working with on the team. It's why, what's in it for me, and then ensure that it's context specific for the imperatives of that business. Just forget the jargon.
Yeah.
Forget the jargon, right? If strategy first always, if we if we know what we're trying to achieve or what that CEO or that business's key imperatives are, it's pretty hard to argue that alignment and trying to get more efficient is a bad thing. So I think probably where people go wrong, and probably where I've gone wrong, is again getting lost in the templates and the jargon versus just trying to speak to what my stakeholders are trying to achieve, and then trying to test for alignment and or understanding of sort of where there are gaps in our ability to execute, and then sort of trying to get the flywheel moving that way, in a way that appeals to that stakeholder. So a little bit of coaching for myself is because I have religion around this process and this way of working. It's like, well, this is obvious, right? But it's not always obvious, and I think it can seem like jargon or just another management flavor of the month if it's not contextualized to those business imperatives.
Yeah, and I think if I were to unpack some of what you said and kind of put an umbrella around it, I think a lot of the heartburn is in the messages it's delivered as this is one more thing I have to do in addition to what I'm trying to do, what you just said, which is drive my strategy, deliver results in my business. And the way this is delivered, it's viewed as something extra that conflicts with or maybe takes away my focus from the thing that matters.
Mhm.
And if that individual or that group of people can bundle those things together and say, look, this isn't one more thing, this is a results enabler of what we're trying to do
That's
and
right.
should not be viewed as extracurricular. So we need to deliver that message in a way that makes sense and resonates, and more importantly is true when we start doing it and doesn't
Mhm.
seem like it is an extra thing on top of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's the lesson, isn't it? And
Yeah.
um, if you can find those quick wins, or that, that handshake between the strategic imperative of the business and what the leaders are hoping to accomplish, and a practice and a system that helps enable that predictably, well then, it's probably unstoppable. It's just, people get bored, so sort of picking those things to work on that prove the case, if you're trying to influence somebody, back to that question.
Yeah. I think more than a lot of, I would say a lot of folks, you in particular, have spent, I would say, a lot of your time applying lean to non-traditional
Yeah.
settings, right?
Yeah.
Outside the four walls of a factory. I'm
Mhm.
trying to remember, honestly, even if we did anything in the factory at Biorad with
Very little.
your involvement, mostly, you know, product development, marketing, sales, innovation, those kinds of topics.
Mhm.
So for those out there that maybe haven't experienced the power that lean thinking and this way of working can bring to the other parts of a business, right? The non-manufacturing parts of the business. What has been your personal experience with that? And so like, what have you learned? What have been the results? If you go back and do things differently, what would you do differently about, applying lean to some of the non-traditional parts of a business?
Yeah, I think the why and the value add was really the alignment enablement, because no function works alone.
Yeah.
No function works alone. And lean, uh, I think, really grew up in operations, because again, if you put if you put life cycle management outside of it, you can sort of, optimize for that factory setting and drive continuous improvement. But the second you bring life cycle into it, obsolescence, retirement, new products, well then you're moving to other parts of the value stream within a company. And so I suppose, and maybe this is my bias of where I come from as a business leader and growing up in marketing. I just think there is so much power in um, in alignment, right? In aligning on what are the portfolio imperatives. Are we predictable in our new product development and vitality? And are we structured in how we're solving problems? Because problems don't get better with time; they just end up being somebody else's to solve. And so if we're all owners, in that journey, and we've got these common languages for getting better every day, I think you're more effective as a company in total.
How
Excuse
do
me.
you test alignment? So like when you're coming in, I think now is a great time. You're 6 months into it. Like how do you test whether or not the business, the leaders, the functions are aligned with what they're trying to accomplish, whether it be the strategy or the operational budget that they've committed to, or both?
Yeah, excuse me. I start with the question when I visit any of these sites, what is the strategy? And I would hope, and maybe not everybody says it exactly the same
And you
way,
ask
but if
that like
you,
one-on-one, or is that in a group setting, or?
yeah, if I'm doing either, team meetings or one-on-one, or I walk the floor, just, going to Gemba. It's, what's the strategy, and what do you think is most important to the business, and what's most important to you? And you just sort of ask questions, and you can sense pretty quickly whether there's clarity on, like, if people are sort of rowing in the same direction. And that doesn't mean groupthink, but do we know what is important to this business and what we're trying to accomplish, and or what the, what the issues are. And you just ask people, what do you think could be improved? And you sense pretty quickly whether there's a culture of transparency. And are people looking to the side, or they're saying, well, it's really interesting, you know every shift change, this is something that's a little bit inefficient, we've been thinking about this. And you keep pulling that thread, but that's where it starts.
Yeah. So testing the alignment in the organization. I just finished reading the book by Jim Collins called Great by Choice.
Yeah, it's a great one.
And one of the things he talks about is the SMAC recipe.
Uh-huh.
And so it's an acronym, SMAC, and it's specific, measurable, and consistent.
Yep.
And every organization, whether they know it or not, has a SMAC recipe that has been sort of the secret to their success. And it's kind of like your strategy in a sense, in that he gave a couple examples, like Southwest Airline, like we're only going to fly segments that are 2 hours or less. We're going to make sure every plane is a 737. So there's 10 of those types of things that really were the recipe of success for the business.
Yeah.
And the more people, to your point, that understand what that is in the company, but more importantly, actually make decisions aligned with it, which is the key, the less likely you are to deviate off course and be misaligned with what your strategy is, or even worse, you start doing things that are outside of your core domain expertise. And it's like you could go back and look at company after company and like why they've fallen from grace. It's like they deviate from that, like that misaligned with the strategy, who they're there to serve, why they're successful. And he makes a critical point in that you shouldn't be locked into those things, in that they're static and cannot be improved, but they also shouldn't be changed out every single year. And he said maybe 10 to 15, 20% at max will change in 3 to 5 years, but you're pretty consistent. And you even go back in time and look at Southwest to when they came up with that to now. And he said something like 10% of it's really changed, right?
Yeah.
And I think to your point, is like a lot of organizations don't understand why they are successful and how to stay successful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. I call it random acts of strategy. We're
Oh, what's that?
random, when it's just, and then we try this, and then we try this, and then we try
Yeah.
this, and there's never enough data to see whether something's working. And a consistently executed okay strategy is better than a poorly executed perfect strategy. Like, you just have to stay consistent, but do the work, understand your markets, have the right sensing resources to understand what's going on. But then back to the beginning of our conversation, control what you can control, and run your business and run your playbook, and don't get bored.
Yeah.
That's usually when it's really working, is once it becomes a little bit more rote.
I think the environment that you're in can make that challenging, which probably leads to a lot of what we're seeing. So like, if you're in a publicly traded company and you try to be consistent and follow the path, and maybe you're taking a company from being all of those things where they were misaligned and they weren't, they're like new strategy every year, and now you're going to say we're going to follow the recipe. You have a short window to prove to shareholders that you're actually driving results with that chosen path, because the answer will typically be, we'll replace the CEO and get a new one in. And you have, maybe if you're lucky, 3 years to prove that out. And in private equity, it's kind of the same deal, where like, you even get to mention the SMAC recipe, quite frankly, sometimes, because you're thinking about the exit the day you consummate the deal.
Right.
So I think you found yourself in a situation where at least you have some relief in some of the pressure and the time constraints of some of that, to stay consistent and aligned and do more business building kind of things.
That's right. Which is what I what I really love to do. It's but no, I love that book. I love Great by Choice. I think it's probably one of Jim Collins's better ones because they do the case control studies of the businesses that started with the same resource pool, similar markets, the same opportunity, and one went like this and one went like that. And I think that retrospective analysis is pretty amazing. So for our viewers out there, it's a good reread if you haven't looked at it in a while.
All right, we've got some questions. You ready for some questions from
I don't know, Damon.
All right, give it your best shot. So this one here is about like the measurement and impact from some of the lean efforts that you've seen in your past. So what measurable impacts or improvements have you seen as a direct result of your lean transformation efforts and your past experience?
So I think most recently, and again, you know, more data was sort of, being established and a better track record. But there were three main things that we were hoping to achieve, and I think we were starting to achieve, at least in my last implementation. The first one was increased new product vitality, so more predictability around both phase gate changes as well as sort of the effectiveness of new product development.
So product vitality for folks on the phone or listening is the percent of revenue from new products that you've launched within a defined period of time. And for every company, it's typically different, but oftentimes it's like products launched within the last 3 years as an
That's right.
example. And the
That's
percent
right.
of
Now,
the
thank
revenue
you.
comes from that.
That's right. That's right. And the development life cycles, particularly in clinical diagnostics, are really quite long. And so what we were really working on was these leading indicators of predictability of process execution and being sort of on the specifications and the target sort of within a phase. But that was getting really quite good, and also quality. So not only sort of right the first time sort of transfer into the factory, but sort of the quality of certain processes. And then the third was around, we worked a lot on sales and operations planning, just aligning commercial demand to production, particularly in a manufacturing environment that has a lot of biological components that have different expiration dating. They're hard to source because they're often coming from humans. And so we did a lot of process improvement work on building supply and demand planning, efficacy. And, for some of our product lines, that was a mission critical basis of competitive advantage, like right product, right expiration dating, right customer, right time. And, I would say that those efforts that we put into that planning process were really, really accretive to both the customer experience and the revenue contribution, within the last year.
What's interesting about those three examples is that you can see how they're inextricably linked too, right? Because as you innovate faster and more and launching in a market, if you're basically instituting change by design into manufacturing supply chain with new products. Therefore, if you don't have your quality figured out, you're going to be launching a lot of boomerangs into the market that come right back at you.
That's right.
And then if you're unable to understand the demand and how to plan for the demand from these new products that you're launching into the market, you're only going to be upsetting the customer that would love to buy this stuff but can't because you're not prepared to manufacture or service and distribute it. So I think this is a great example of how you thoughtfully looked at this as a horizontal process, like a fulfillment stream for the customers. At the end of that, we need to work on the things in the right order of sequence and priority so that we can get the outcome, which is the growth that we strive for as a business.
That's right.
Versus...
That's right. And we never tackled our opportunities or sort of our engagement with lean transformation as a function. We approached it as either a value stream or a core
horizontal
business process.
Yeah.
And that's critical. You never say, oh, I'm just going to do R&D. Well, R&D does one thing in the handshake, right? It's what's the system? Was our product innovation system.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the gym and I'm gonna work on my right bicep.
Just my right bicep, yeah. Just on Tuesday.
Yes. Okay, another question here. What advice do you have for building a bottoms-up continuous improvement mindset within an enterprise?
Why and what's in it for me? And so then you arm people with the tools that make sense for that environment. And if people, you create an environment where they get the bug, and then they're also seeing the benefit of driving process improvement and eliminating waste, and everybody's sort of benefiting from that. They see the why. You don't just squeeze the lemon for lemon squeezing sake, right? It's in service of something else. It's in service of um, quality improvement, so that our customers then want to part with more of their hard-earned dollars with us, and then so that you've got more mission to invest.
Great. Have you ever faced skepticism from shareholders or people that you're trying to get to adopt these new mindsets? And I think I know the answer to that. And the follow-up question is, how do you deal with that?
I think it goes back to one of the questions you were asking earlier, Damon. Sort of what lessons did I learn, when I was trying to sort of influence from, not necessarily the middle, but sort of n minus one, excuse me, in an organization. And I think that, really the lessons learned and the way to avoid skepticism is to sort of speak to their imperatives, right? Speak to whoever your stakeholders' imperatives are. If, avoid the jargon, avoid just, positioning it as like you said it earlier, it's not an extracurricular, and it's, if we're trying to achieve this and we've got a strategic plan and or operational imperatives, how are we going to build alignment within an organization to ensure we all have the same priorities and that there's a higher chance of execution success? And there's just, you call it whatever you want, right? These are cross-functional processes, but what do we know? What do we don't know? What are we trying to achieve? What's the current state? Is there a gap between the two?
Yeah.
Do we need to close the gap? How might we close the gap? Like, you don't need to speak in jargon. This is lean, right?
Yeah. Common sense vigorously applied is what Larry Culp used to say. So
that's right.
So I think we have maybe one more question here. So in your experience, it sounds like this is an HR type of question. How has HR played a vital role in helping to shape, preserve, and build the high performance lean business system culture that you're trying to install within an organization? I think that could include things like how we recruit, what questions we ask for, what skills we look for, those kinds of things. So like, what role in your mind does HR play as a partner in this journey that you're taking businesses on?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, at the end of the day, companies are largely comprised of people. And so it's one of the most important aspects of any change management or any building a culture of trying to get a little bit better every day is ensuring that we're fostering that culture and we're populating it with people that have that orientation. So there's probably a sort of a competency and a recruiting aspect to it, but also supporting, at least in my experience, having partners that support me in being the steward of that culture, so that we're always creating an environment of, this is the way we work. Again, no problem's a big problem. It's just, how do we address it, and are we working on the things that we think are going to have the biggest impact? And so it's an environment thing. I think it is a talent and to some extent, a recruiting thing for folks with the right mindset who are, going to be here for that continuous improvement journey, because it's never done.
Yeah.
Right? It's never done. And I think if you set an environment like, we'll just get through this and then it's over. And that takes, I think, grit and, recruiting for talent and creating an environment where, people are gritty and want to solve problems. I think that's really the secret sauce.
Great advice. So this last question is from me, and we typically end this way. We're almost at the hour here. So for any CEO or president or individual who's thinking about taking their team or their company on this journey and maybe hasn't initiated that yet, what advice would you give to those folks?
Just start. Just start.
Yep.
But really, and even if, well, first I would say, think about your strategy and your business imperatives, but sometimes you need to just start to define those, right? So it's just start and start asking really good questions. What are we trying to achieve, or what problems are we trying to solve?
Great advice. Thank you so much, Dara.
Thanks, Damon. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Before we bid farewell to Dara, I encourage everybody to take a moment to reflect on the valuable insights and practical advice that she shared with us today, and more importantly, how you can apply those in your own lean journeys within your businesses. If you have any further questions or like to explore the possibilities of enhancing or beginning your own lean transformation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Lean Focus. We're here to support you. And once again, thank you to Dara for taking time to share her experience and expertise with us, and want to say thank you for being a part of this interview series, and hope to see the rest of you on next month's version of Lean Catalyst, where we'll have another CEO who will share their wisdom as well. And for those of you that haven't maybe seen these series before, all of these are archived on our website. You can watch any one of these on demand, or you can go to our Lean Focus YouTube channel and you can see hours and hours of folks like Dara sharing their experience. So we're in season 2 now. So this has been a very enjoyable series I've loved participating on. Thanks so much, Dara.
Thanks, Damon. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye.